My name is Wendy Thatcher, and I'm 34 years old. On a Tuesday morning in June, sitting in my work truck with gas station coffee going cold in the holder, I opened a booking contract and found my mother's signature at the bottom of it. She had put down $18,000, non-refundable, to hold a wedding date for my sister. The venue was Callenwood. That's the estate where I bussed tables the summer I turned 17, the summer my mom stood in the pantry and told the manager I was staff material. She picked that house on purpose. She wanted me to either stay home or carry a tray. Either one worked for her. One of them was the whole point. What she didn't check was who had bought the property in March. My name was printed on page 11 of the contract she signed, one page above her own handwriting, and what I did after the tasting is the part my family still won't talk about. Welcome back to Wise Family Revenge. This is where we tell the long stories, the ones about families, money, and the quiet minute when somebody finally stops asking permission to sit down. If you have ever been put in your place by the person who was supposed to protect you, you already know how this one feels. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. It was 6:40 in the morning and the gravel lot was still wet. I do contracts before the crew shows up because after 7 I belong to the building. My phone had 4 new items in the booking queue. 3 were inquiries. The 4th was signed. Thatcher Rooks. May 16th. $52,000. Total contract. $18,000 received as a non-refundable deposit, processed the day before by Ruth Vance. I read the name twice, the way you read a road sign in fog. Then I read the date, and the number, and the name, a third time. Thatcher is not a rare name in Rockbridge County. There are Thatchers who run a tire shop and Thatchers who breed beagles, and none of them are mine. So I opened the document and swiped, and there it was on page 2. Lynette M. Thatcher, billing address on Old Post Road, phone number I have known since I was old enough to dial. She had signed page 12 in her clean hostess handwriting, the same loops she uses on place cards. She had initialed the cancellation clause. She had never once turned back to page 11. Page 11 is the boring one. Ownership and notices. Venue operated by Ninth Field Partners LLC, and under that, in 9-point type, the managing member of record, W. Thatcher. My mother had put a pen to a document with my name in it and never saw me. Marge lifted her head off the passenger seat, sighed, and put it back down. She is 11 and she has opinions about early mornings. I sat in that truck for 9 minutes without moving. The coffee went from warm to nothing. Then I did the only thing my hands knew how to do at that hour. I got out and went to work. Callenwood sits on 9 acres at the end of a lane that floods twice a year. Built in 1897, 41 rooms, a slate roof that has been patched by 6 generations of men who all did it a little wrong. It was a country club, then an inn, then nothing. It sat empty from 2015 until this March, when 3 of us bought it at auction for $610,000, which is not a bargain when the wiring is knob and tube, and half the windows are single pane with the glazing gone to powder. 31 of those windows still had no new glass in June. We had a plan for that. The plan was money we did not have yet. I own a small restoration company, 4 employees, 2 trucks, a shop on Fenn Street with an apartment over it where I have lived for 11 years. I know how to make an 1897 house behave. That week, I was on my knees in the ballroom sanding black walnut by hand, because the drum sander burns figured wood, and there is no undoing a burn. It takes 11 days by hand. Kyle Petrie and Devin Ross did the sash work upstairs while I crawled the ballroom, and all 3 of us ate lunch on the terrace steps because there was no furniture in the building yet. My kneecaps looked like 2 bad apples. People ask what restoration smells like, and the honest answer is hot dust, boiled linseed oil, and mouse. I loved it in a way I did not examine. I had worked in that house once before, for 8 weeks, a long time ago, and I had told exactly 2 people about it. That is a different story, and it was about to stop being different. I was 17 that summer and the job was $9 an hour, cash on Fridays, in an envelope. 8 weeks, 6 shifts a week. My mother got it for me. She had been running front of house at Rockbridge Country Club for 2 years by then, after 2 decades of working her way up to it, and she knew the woman who ran events at Callenwood, and she made a phone call in her good voice. I was fast. I could carry 4 plates and clear a table without a sound, and I learned the whole floor plan in 3 shifts. In July, there was a garden luncheon, 90 women in linen, and one of them stopped me by the lemonade and asked where I was going to college. I said I wasn't. I said I wanted to learn wood, furniture, floors, old houses. She said that sounded like a wonderful hobby and let me go. 20 minutes later, I came through the swinging door with an armload of glassware, and my mother was in the pantry with the events manager, checking a tray count. She reached over and straightened my collar while she talked, the way she does, and she did not lower her voice. She's staff material. That's not an insult if it's true. The events manager laughed the way you laugh at a boss. Nobody looked at me. That is the part that stuck, honestly. Not the sentence itself, but the way the room simply went on around it. My mother went back to the tray count. I carried the glassware to the sink and finished the shift and drove her home at 11 because she'd had 2 glasses of wine. I did not say anything in the car. I counted the treads on the back stairs on my way up that night, and the number stayed with me for 17 years, which tells you something about what I did with it. She called me at 8 that same night in June, and she was not calling to ask. My mother makes 2 kinds of phone calls. One kind asks you to move a table. The other kind informs you that the table has already been moved, and you should be pleased. This was the second kind. She said she had gotten the date. She said Paige and Nathan were thrilled, which is a word Paige has never once used. Paige says fine, and she says sure, and about once a year she says wonderful. Then she told me where. Callenwood, she said, and she held the word out like a coat she wanted me to admire. The nicest room in this county, Wendy. Not one thing in Delham comes close. She has a way of praising a place that makes it sound like she owns a piece of it. She talked for a while about the Rooks family. Nathan's father owns 4 equipment dealerships and has a table with his name on a plate at the club. She said, "Mr. Rooks is going to walk into that hall and understand we are not people from nowhere." She said it the way other people say grace. I stood in my kitchen with the phone at my ear and looked at the wall calendar, where May 16th was already blocked out in Ruth's handwriting. Then, light as asking the time, she added, "You know the place, don't you? You worked there a summer." I said I did. There was a pause of maybe 2 seconds, and in those 2 seconds I understood I was being handed something, and I could not tell yet whether it was a gift or a bill. "Well," she said, "it's a beautiful house." And she hung up first, the way she always does, so the last word belongs to her. 2 days later, I was under the main staircase with Alma Reyes and a tape measure, and we found a wall that lied. Alma ran housekeeping at Callenwood from 1979 to 2015. She is 71, 5 foot nothing, and she has forgotten more about this building than the county archive contains. She walks the halls with her hands behind her back like an inspector, and she has never once been wrong about where a pipe runs. I hired her as a restoration consultant at $40 an hour, which she called robbery, and then she took it. We had the 1897 floor plans spread on a sawhorse. The plans showed 2 staircases, the grand one, walnut and brass, curling up out of the hall, and a second one, tucked behind it, running from the 3rd floor straight down into the kitchen. Service stair. On the plan it is drawn narrow, 17 treads, no landing. On the actual wall in front of us there was nothing. Flat plaster, painted the same soft green as the hall, a picture rail running across it. I knocked. It answered hollow, all the way up, a sound like a drum in another room. I knocked again at chest height, then down by my knee, and got the same empty note both times. There was a room-shaped nothing back there under 6 coats of paint. Alma didn't even look. "They closed it in '84, she said. I asked why. She squared the corner of the plans with 2 fingers and said, "Somebody decided the guests didn't need to watch us go by." She said it with no weight on it at all, the way you report the weather in a town you left. Then she asked what time the plumber was coming, and that was the end of it. I marked the wall with a pencil X and did not touch it for 7 weeks. Ruth Vance ran a 300-room hotel for 19 years before she got tired of other people's carpet. She put in $44,000. I put in 46. And Denny Pruitt, a retired plumber who fell in love with the roof, put in 40. That's 130. The bank, Farmers and Merchants of Rockbridge County, put in 480,000, and banks do not hand that to three people with a dream. They sent an appraiser, then a second appraiser, then a man who spent 2 hours in the basement with a flashlight. There is a covenant. We have to show $180,000 in signed event revenue by October 15th, or they can call the loan or demand a cash injection. I hold 51% because I brought the labor, which the appraiser valued at $91,000 of sweat. That is a strange thing to see, written down about your own hands. On the second Friday in June, Ruth spread the booking sheet across the felt of the old billiard table, because it is the only surface in the house that is flat and clean. 144, she said, tapping the total. Then she moved her finger down 2 rows to the May 16th line and tapped again. This one takes us to 196. This one is what keeps us alive. She had drawn a little box around it in pencil. Ruth does not draw boxes around things for fun. She looked up, pleased, waiting for me to be pleased. I said it was a good week. I did not tell her whose name was on it. I have gone over that decision 100 times since. I made it in under a second, and it cost me more than anything I did on purpose. My sister called at 10 that night, off a 12-hour shift, with that flat, sanded-down voice she gets. Paige is 29. She coordinates patient care at a clinic in Columbus, 52 minutes from here on a good day, and she has spent her whole life being easy to be around. It is not a small skill, and it has cost her more than anybody in our family admits. "Are you free May 16th?" she said. I did not mention that the date was already up on my board in dry erase marker. Not a question, the way she said it. Then she laughed at herself and asked it properly. I said I was. She said Mom had handled the venue, all of it, deposit and everything, and wasn't that something? "You know Mom," she said. "She's good at that stuff." I asked if she'd picked it. There was a pause with a television in it. "She found it," Paige said. "It's supposed to be gorgeous." Then she asked if I wanted to help with flowers, and I said yes before she finished, because it was the first thing anyone had asked me instead of told me. We talked about peonies for 4 minutes. She wanted white ones, and she kept apologizing for wanting them, which is a whole diagnosis right there. And then, right at the end, in the voice she uses when she's already decided not to make it a big deal, she said, "Mom said you probably wouldn't come." I looked out the shop window at the dark street. "I'll be there," I said. She said good, and she meant it. And I could hear her already halfway asleep. I sat on the stairs a while after. My sister was going to get married in my building, and nobody had thought to tell me, because nobody thought there was anything to tell. 10 days later, an envelope came to the shop, addressed in her place card handwriting. Inside was a printout, a preliminary seating chart, 11 months before the wedding, drawn to scale, with the head table shaded gray. My mother has done seating for the Historical Society Gala for 9 years. She does not do it wrong. She can tell you which 2 women in this county cannot be seated within sight of each other, and why, going back to 1998. Table 1, the Rookses. Table 2, the Rookses people. On down the room, out toward the windows, and then at the bottom of the page, hard against the double doors marked kitchen, was table 11. 2 second cousins from Zanesville, 1 empty chair, and me. The kitchen doors on that plan were drawn with the little arc that shows a swing, and my chair sat inside the arc. I called her. I did not lead with anything. I asked why table 11. She sounded delighted to be asked. She said that table has the best access, and that it's the right spot for anyone who's going to be getting up and down. I asked who was getting up and down. "Well," she said, "you never sit through anything, honey." Then she laughed, warm as a dinner roll, and gave me the line she has been giving people my entire life, the one she says like it's an old family saying about weather. "Everybody eats. Not everybody sits down." She said she had to go, The club had a retirement party. I stood in the shop with the printout in my hand and I noticed the number before I could stop myself. Table 11, page 11. The same number, twice, meaning two completely different things, and only one of us could see both. The obvious move was to cancel. I want you to know I tried. I called Marlon Pike, who does our entity work, on a Thursday, and I asked him a plain question. Can the venue terminate a signed booking on its own initiative? He said yes. Then he said, read your own paperwork first. In the tone of a man who has watched people shoot their own foot in slow motion. Marlon has done entity work in this county for 26 years, and he has stopped being surprised by anything. So I read it. Section 9, the part I wrote myself in February, before we had a single client, back when I was worried that people would not trust a brand new venue run by 3 locals. Venue initiated cancellation. Full refund of all monies paid, plus a venue relocation credit of $7,500. I put that clause in on purpose. I put it in because I know what it feels like to be small and dependent on somebody else's calendar. Ruth had used it in 3 sales calls that spring. It closed 2 of them. One was a couple whose first venue folded in March and kept their deposit. They stood in our hall and cried about it. I remember deciding that would never happen at my house. So the math was this. Cancel, and I hand back $18,000, add $7,500 out of operating cash, and drop $52,000 off the signed revenue line before the bank ever looks at it. Marlon let the silence sit. Then he said, you built a trap, Wendy. It's a good trap. Clients love it. I said thank you and hung up and sat in the truck. My own decency had a lock on it and I was on the wrong side of the door. Ruth figured it out on a Monday, the way she figures everything out, by reading something twice. The contact email on the Thatcher Rooks file was Lynette Thatcher, at the club's domain, because my mother uses her work address for everything including her dentist. It has the club crest in the signature block. Ruth came into the ballroom while I was oiling the second-to-last section of floor. She stood at the edge of the drop cloth so she wouldn't track. The mother of the bride on May 16th, she said. Any relation? I sat back on my heels and told her. All of it. Short version, 90 seconds, including the pantry. Ruth listened with her arms crossed and her jaw working. Then she said, we should cancel today. Eat the $7,500 and put the date back on the market. Because the first wedding season at a new venue is the only one you get, and she was not going to spend it inside somebody's family. She was right. Everything she said was right. I said no. She asked why, and I gave her 3 business reasons. And all 3 were true, and none of them were the reason. Ruth is 52, and has fired more people than I have met. She let me finish. Then she said, quiet. Then this isn't a business decision. Picked up her clipboard, and went to meet the linen rep. She did not slam anything. She never does. But from that Monday on, Ruth sent me things in email that she used to say out loud, and I felt the temperature in that house drop about 4 degrees. If you have ever kept a secret at work to protect somebody who wasn't protecting you, tell me about it in the comments. I want to know how yours turned out, because I did not know how mine would. Stay with me. This is where it gets expensive. In July, I gutted the old pantry to make a flower cooler. It's the right room for it. North wall, no windows, already tiled to the ceiling. I was pulling out the wire shelving, 4 bays of it, rusted to the anchors. Halfway through the 3rd bay, I stopped, because my boots had found a spot on the floor, and my body knew it before I did. Second tile from the door frame, the one with the hairline crack running corner to corner. That is where I stood at 17 with an armload of glassware. 12 inches square, chipped at one corner, grout gone the color of a nickel. I could have found it in the dark. The crack was longer now. I could hear her as clear as if she were behind me with a tray count in her hand. Staff material. Not shouted. Not even unkind to her ear. Said in the same voice she uses to tell you your hem is down. Helpful. That is the word for it. My mother has always been helpful. I got the last bay off the wall and my hands were shaking, and it took me a second to place the feeling, because I had it filed under sad for 17 years, and it turned out to be filed wrong. It was not sad. It was rage. and it had been sitting in that room the whole time waiting for me to come back for it. 17 years of it, folded up small and stored in a pantry, which is at least an efficient use of space. I set the bay down easy so it wouldn't chip the tile. Then I wrote insulated door, 6 inches, on the materials list, and went to check on the plumber. That is how I handle things. It works, right up until it doesn't. The third floor had been used as storage since the Reagan administration. In late July, Alma and I hauled out 19 boxes, and one of them was staff photographs, banded by year, 1983 through 1986. Rubber bands that turned to tar when you touched them. Somebody used to line the banquet crew up on the terrace steps at the end of every season and take a picture with a real camera. Alma sat down on a trunk and went through them slowly, naming people, laughing at a man named Boudry, who apparently could not be trusted with a carving fork. She had a story for every face, and she was enjoying herself. Then she got to one photograph and she stopped laughing. She looked at it for maybe 2 seconds. Then she went through the next 6 much faster than she had gone through the first 6. I asked her what it was. She said, "Long time ago," and asked whether the new firebox had come in. I let it go, because Alma has earned the right to change a subject. But I took that box down to the office, and after everybody left, I sat at the desk with the gooseneck lamp and went through it myself. Summer staff, 1984. 14 people on the terrace steps in white aprons. Third from the left in the back row, a young woman with heavy dark hair and her chin up, standing the way you stand when you have been told to stand up straight. 20 years old. My mother's face. Nobody in our house has ever mentioned that she worked at Callenwood. Not once. Not at a single Thanksgiving. Not in 34 years. I put the photograph down and then I picked it up again, and I looked at the steps she was standing on, which are the steps outside my kitchen door. She called on a Tuesday in August to schedule the tasting. September 6th, 2 o'clock. She had already cleared it with a woman named Ruth. Wasn't Ruth pleasant? I said Ruth was very pleasant, and got down off the ladder. I was up a ladder with a caulk gun and I put it down. Then she got to the second reason for the call, and she got to it the way she gets to everything, sideways and cheerful. "Now, you know that house," she said. "You know where everything is. Would you handle the drinks for me on the day? Just the bar. It puts people at ease, seeing family behind it." She said it warmly. In her own mind, she was doing me a kindness, handing me a job so that I would have somewhere to stand. I stood on that ladder and looked out at 9 acres of my own crabgrass. I asked her one question, and I asked it flat, because I wanted it on the record between us. "Instead of table 11, I said. "Or in addition to it?" She made a sound like I had stepped on her foot in church. "Wendy, honestly. Then, you make everything so heavy." Then she moved straight to whether Paige should do a champagne toast or a signature cocktail, and she talked for 6 more minutes. And I said, 4 times. Somewhere in there she asked whether I could get a deal on linens through work. When she hung up, I stayed on the ladder. Up until that phone call, I had left myself one exit. I had been telling myself she chose the house because it was the prettiest house. She had just closed that exit for me, politely, without ever using a single word I could quote back at her. I was in the hall at 6:20 the next morning with an 8-pound sledge. I want to be clear that this was not a tantrum. I taped the picture rail, I laid a drop cloth, I put on a respirator, and I knocked along the green wall with my knuckles until I had the hollow mapped in pencil. A rectangle 2.5 feet wide, running up past the picture rail into the ceiling. Then I set my feet and swung. The plaster came off in dry slabs, whole sheets of it, the way 80s work does when it was never keyed to the lathe properly. Dust rolled out into the hall and hung there in the light from the east windows, and Alma came to the kitchen door with a dish towel and put her hand over her mouth. She stood there a long time and never said anything at all. Behind the wall was a staircase, 17 treads of quarter-sawn white oak, no landing, tight against the chimney chase. 42 years of dust lying on them so evenly it looked like felt. And a handrail, plain oak, no molding, worn down in a long, shallow groove exactly where a hand goes. 4 decades of women had polished that rail with their palms carrying trays up and down, and nobody had ever put a coat of finish on it. Kyle and Devin came in from the truck and stood there with their coffee. And I said it out loud, right then, before I could get sensible about it. We're bringing this back. Full restoration, treads, and rail. And every bride who gets married in this house is going to come down these stairs. Denny had walked in behind them. He asked what that would run. I said 14,000, and that I'd do the woodwork myself on Sundays so it'd be labor and materials only. He looked up the shaft into the dark for a second. Then he said, "Huh," and went to look at the roof. I did not have $14,000. I ordered the oak that afternoon. That night, I pulled up her order to see what she had actually bought. It is the cheapest package we sell. 2-course plated dinner, chicken or the vegetarian. Seasonal arrangements, meaning whatever the wholesaler has too much of in May. In May, that is, carnations and pom-pom mums. House sound system. No terrace lighting, no bar upgrade, no live music. She had spent $18,000 on the address and left nothing for the party. I sat with that for a while, and I understood it completely, and it made me tired. For my mother, the room is the point. The people inside it are just proof the room happened. She has been to 400 weddings and she can give you the address of every one of them. So I opened the package builder and moved them to the top tier. 3 courses, the short rib and the whitefish. Greenhouse flowers from Vesper Farm, garden roses, not carnations dyed to match. Bistro lighting strung the length of the stone terrace, 42 fixtures. A string quartet out of Columbus for the ceremony and cocktail hour. The difference came to $9,400. I coded it in the books as owner promotional allowance and paid it with my personal card. The one with the airline miles I never use. It put me $1,100 over my usual limit and the bank texted twice to make sure it was really me. I told nobody. Not Ruth, not Paige, not Alma. I told myself it was for my sister, who has never in her life asked for the expensive thing, and that was 70% true, which at the time I decided was enough. The other 30% did not have a name yet. The storm came through on August 11th at 2 in the morning. Straight line winds, 70 miles an hour on the county gauge, with hail ahead of it. The small kind that sounds like gravel thrown at a car hood, and Callenwood's west wing lost slate off the windward pitch in a strip about 9 feet wide. I got the alarm on my phone at 2:06 and I was there in 14 minutes with a headlamp and every tarp in the shop. Kyle met me. We were up on that roof until 5, in rain, tying off to the chimney, and every time the wind came over that ridge, the tarp tried to take us with it. And I have done a lot of stupid things for money, but that was the first one I did for a building. Daylight showed the real damage. Water down inside the wall of the west stair, plaster gone soft on 2 floors, and 40 feet of slate to relay with salvaged tile because you cannot buy 1897 Vermont gray. There is a salvage yard outside Coshocton that had 11 squares of it, and 11 squares was exactly enough, which is the only lucky thing that happened to me in August. The estimate came to $31,000. The adjuster walked the roof on August 19th, took 40 minutes, and put the phrase in his report that anybody in my trade can recite in their sleep. Deferred maintenance? The carrier paid $6,000 for the wind-driven portion and denied the rest. I signed the repair authorization anyway, because a wet wall in September is a rotten wall in March. That left $19,000 in operating cash. From that morning on, every dollar in the building had a name and a job, including 18,000 of them that had come from my mother. Paige asked me to come to her dress fitting on the last Saturday in August, in a shop on High Street with too many mirrors, 3 walls of them, angled, so you can watch yourself being watched from 4 directions at once. I sat on a velvet bench that was built for a smaller person. She came out in the 3rd dress and it was the one, obviously, and she stood on the little round platform while a woman named Dot pinned the back. Paige has our father's shoulders and she has spent her life apologizing for them. Paige talked the whole time, cheerful, and if you were not listening, you would have heard a happy bride. What she actually said was this. Mom had revised the guest list 3 times. The third revision took out Corinne, who Paige has been best friends with since they were 11 and who was going to read at the ceremony. Tables only go to 10, Paige said. And you can't do 11 at one and 9 at another. It looks unbalanced from the door. Corinne had picked out a poem back in April. She said that last part in Mom's cadence without noticing. Then she laughed and said it was fine. Corinne understood. They'd do brunch. And she reached up and pulled the shoulder of that dress higher, the way you square a uniform. I have made that exact motion in 3 different aprons. I watched my sister do that in the mirror, and I felt something go quiet and cold in my chest. I asked her if she liked Callenwood. She looked at me in the glass, honestly puzzled. I haven't seen it, she said. Mom sent pictures. September 6th, 2 o'clock, the East dining room. 6 chairs at a round table, linen that had not finished relaxing from the fold, and the smell of brown butter and rosemary coming through the pass. Ruth ran it. My mother co-ran it, which is a thing she can do to a room without being invited. She squared the flatware at every setting before anyone sat. She asked Ruth intelligent questions about drainage on the terrace. She said the word owner 3 times in the first 10 minutes. How nice the owners had been about the date. Whether the owners were local, whether the owners had considered valet. Ruth answered everyone without looking at me. Paige sat with her hands in her lap. Nathan was pleasant and out of his depth. Nathan Rooks Sr. ate slowly and said almost nothing, which is its own kind of pressure. I came in late from the west stair, in coveralls with plaster dust on both knees, because I had been chasing that wet wall since 7. My mother saw me and her face did something small and efficient. There she is, she said. You came in the kitchen door. Smart. It's closer. Ivo brought out the 3rd course. Short rib, wine reduction, a little tower of parsnip. My mother looked at the plate and then at Ruth. This isn't our menu, she said, still smiling. We're 2 courses. Ruth said the contract had been upgraded. Upgraded by whom? My mother said, and the smile stayed exactly where it was. I'd like to speak with the owner, please. Today, if that's possible. Ruth put down her pen and looked at me for the first time all afternoon, and I wiped my hands on the rag from my back pocket and pulled out the chair across from my mother and sat down at the table. You're talking to her, I said. Ivo came through with the bread and set it down and nobody touched it. Nathan Sr. made one short sound, not quite a laugh, and then studied his water glass. Paige said, "Wait." My mother did not move for 3 full seconds. Her hands stayed folded. Nothing happened in her face at all, which I have thought about more than anything else in this story. Then she asked me a question I was not ready for, in a completely level voice. Since March? We went out on the stone terrace, just the 2 of us, while Ruth walked the Rookses through the ballroom. My mother did not ask how. She did not ask when, or with what money, or whether I was all right, or any of the other things a person might ask. She stood at the balustrade with her purse on her forearm and asked, "Who knows?" Not who else knows. Who knows? As though the fact of it were a leak coming through a ceiling. I said the county recorder and anybody who wants to look. She absorbed that. Then she turned around and told me she wanted the deposit back, all of it, and that she would move the wedding to the Fellowship Hall at Delham Methodist, which seats 140, and has a kitchen. She had already looked it up. She already had the date. I told her the contract says non-refundable, and that it says it in 2 places, and that she initialed one of them. She said, "So you're going to take my money?" I said, "I'm going to put on a wedding." That was when her voice changed. Not louder, just thinner, and she told me where the 18,000 had come from. She had drawn it off the home equity line on the house on Old Post Road, the house she and my dad bought in 1990 and finished paying for the year before he died. She told me that the way you lay down a card you have been holding all night. And she was not bluffing. I knew the payment schedule on that line of credit before she finished this sentence, because I have done her taxes since 2019. I know the balance, the rate, and the month it comes due. My mother has never in her life raised her voice in public, and she did not need to. The story went around Rockbridge County in 9 days, table by table, through exactly the rooms she is in charge of. Ladies' Bridge on Tuesday, choir practice, the Historical Society Board on Wednesday, the Rotary lunch. My mother did not have to say one untrue thing to make it travel. The version that came back to me had 2 moving parts, and both of them worked. Part 1: Callenwood is being run by the Thatcher girl who used to clean rooms out there. Part 2: they raise your price after you sign. That second part is the one that killed us, because it is the only accusation in the event business that spreads faster than food poisoning. The Rhodes wedding cancelled on the 17th. 24,000. The Beckman 50th anniversary cancelled on the 21st. 18. Ruth walked into the office on the 22nd with a printout and laid it on the desk facing me and put her finger on a line item. Owner promotional allowance, $9,400. She said. So there's a part of this you also didn't tell me. I said there was. She looked at the ceiling for a second. Then she said, in a voice with no heat in it at all, "Everybody eats, right? Not everybody sits down." She had heard it from me, 90 seconds worth, back in June, and she had kept it. Signed revenue on the board that morning was $154,000. The covenant number was 180. We had 3 weeks. If you have ever watched a rumor in a small town turn into an actual number on an actual spreadsheet, you know the specific kind of quiet that puts in a room. Subscribe and stay with me, because I still hadn't decided anything, and that was the problem. I drove out to Old Post Road on a Sunday afternoon. 6 minutes from the shop, past the grain elevator, a low brick ranch with a concrete goose on the step that she dresses for holidays. In September, the goose wears a little scarecrow hat. She let me in and kept folding napkins at the kitchen table, 40 of them, for a christening at the club. She folds them into fans. She has folded a fan for every important day of my life, and for 2 or 3 of my worst ones. I asked her one question and then I shut up. Did you pick Callenwood because it's beautiful, or because of me? She did not stop folding. She said, both. Then she gave me the rest without being asked, which is the part I did not expect. She said she wanted Mr. Rooks to walk into a room like that and see the Thatchers standing in it. She said Paige had a real chance to be somebody's family in this county, and that chances like that come once. And then she said the other thing. Still folding, still not looking up. And I wanted you to see it again, because you've spent your whole life imagining some other version of yourself, and it's making you hard, and one afternoon in that house would have set you straight before you wasted any more of it. She said hard the way a doctor says a word. She creased the fold with her thumbnail. I was saving you from hoping. She did not say it cruelly. She said it the way you would tell somebody the stove was left on. Then she stood the napkin up in a fan on the plate and started the next one, and asked if I wanted coffee. We met in the kitchen on Tuesday, the 3 of us, standing up, which is how Ruth runs a meeting she intends to win. No chairs, no coffee, 12 minutes. Her proposal was clean. Keep the 18,000, enforce the contract as written, deliver the wedding at the upgraded tier and take photographs of every square foot of it, because the best answer to a rumor is 132 guests with phones. Get the terrace lights into every photograph, she said. People believe lights. And if my mother said one more word about pricing to one more board, have Marlin send a cease and desist on 9th Field letterhead. Denny nodded along with all of it. As business, it was correct. It was more than correct. It was generous, because it gave my mother the wedding she wanted while making her pay for it in full. I said I needed 2 days. Ruth put both hands flat on the steel table and asked me the question I had been walking around since June. Do you want to win? She said. Or do you want your mother to invite you to sit down? Nobody had ever fit it into one sentence before. I have known Ruth 4 years, and she did it standing up, in a kitchen, without raising her voice. I did not answer, which was an answer. Denny cleared his throat and said to the floor that he had cash if the October number came up short, and that he was happy to put it in, but I should understand what it buys. My money buys points, he said. It doesn't buy peace of mind. You've got to get that somewhere else. Then he went out to check the roof, because there is always a roof. Alma found me the next morning standing at the bottom of the open stairwell with a cup of coffee I had not touched. She had the 1984 photograph in her hand. She had gone and gotten it out of the box herself, which for Alma is an act of enormous violence. She does not like going back through boxes. She said, "You know she worked here." I said I did now. So she told me. Summer of 1984. Banquet crew. My mother was 20. She was quick, and she was proud, and she wanted the front-of-house job that had just come open. In August, her boyfriend gave her a ring at a drive-in in Delham, and the next evening she came to work early and walked in through the front door to show the girls in the office, holding her hand up, laughing. The woman who ran the house then took her by the elbow. Alma held up her own arm to show me exactly where, above the joint, the grip you use on a child in a store, and Alma's own hand shook a little, showing me. Walked her back out through the hall in front of 6 people, and told her that staff used the kitchen entrance. My mother worked her shift. Alma said she never saw her cry. Not once. Not that night. Not ever. She worked 2 more seasons after that. She was always early. That November, the owners plastered over the service stair, and by the next spring my mother had a job at the club, where she has been arranging other people's tables for 41 years. She has never once been asked to sit down at one. Alma tapped the photograph twice against her palm. She didn't close that staircase, she said. But she learned it. Paige drove out that Thursday on her day off, 52 minutes, and saw Callenwood for the first time. She stood in the middle of the hall in her coat and turned around once, slowly, and did not say anything for a good while. The east windows were doing what they do at 3 in the afternoon, laying long panels of light down the floor I had sanded by hand. Then she said, "Oh." That was all, and it was worth more than the $9,400. We sat on the bottom 2 treads of the grand stair, and she asked me to leave it alone. Take the money, do the wedding, don't push Mom, don't make her choose. I just want one day without a war in it, she said, and I knew exactly what she was asking me for, because I have wanted that same day since I was 17, and her chin went, and she got it back under control fast the way she does. I asked her a question instead of answering. If nobody else was paying, where would you want to get married? She opened her mouth. She looked around the hall, at the east windows, at the plaster dust still on the baseboards. And she could not produce a single answer. Not one. 29 years old, and she had never been asked. She left before 4 because of traffic. I walked her out, and at the door she stopped and said, "Mom told me not to come in the front. She said it'd look like I was inspecting." And she went down the kitchen steps, the same 6 steps, and I stood there and watched my sister do 1984 all over again, 42 years later, without either of them knowing the words to it. I took the 2 days in the housekeeper's room on the 3rd floor, where I had been sleeping since the storm because somebody had to be in the building. A cot, a lamp, and a window that looks at the back of the ice house. On the back of a slate estimate, I drew a line down the middle. Column A. Enforce. Keep the 18,000. Deliver the wedding. Sit at table 11 by the kitchen doors in my own house while my mother tells 132 people she found this place. Signed revenue stays at 154. 26,000 short of the covenant, and 26,000 is a number you can chase. Column B. Void it. Give the money back. Signed revenue drops to 102. 78,000 short, 5 weeks out, which is not a number you chase. It is a number you sell something to cover. And there was exactly one thing I owned that was worth that much. I sat with that page for a long time, and somewhere around 1 in the morning I finally saw the thing that had been standing behind me since March. I had not bought this house because I loved it. I had bought a courtroom. I had been trying a case since I was 17 in front of a judge who was never going to rule, and every board and beam and window in this place was another exhibit I was entering into evidence. 41 rooms of argument. Every dollar of that loan was a sentence in it. Every Sunday on those stairs. I called Denny at 11:40. He answered on the second ring, wide awake, because plumbers are. I asked what 18 points would cost me. He said, 85, and Ruth runs it. At 5 after 9 the next morning, I called Marlon Pike and told him what I wanted. A waiver of the non-refundable provision executed by the venue, and a termination of the Thatcher Rook's booking at the venue's own election, effective immediately, with all monies returned and the relocation credit expressly declined by the client's non-request. He asked me if I understood that I was giving up a defense I would never get back. I said yes. He asked me if I understood the covenant math. I said better than he did. He asked me a third time, in a different voice, whether anybody was pressuring me. I said the opposite was true, that everyone who was paid to advise me was telling me to keep it, and that I was overruling all of them. He sent the documents at 9:31. I signed at 9:41, standing at the steel table in the kitchen with my phone propped against the salt bin. Then I opened the bank app and moved $18,000 from Ninth Field Partners to the account ending in 4402, which is the checking account my mother has had since 1986 and still balances by hand. I have seen the register. She writes the running total in blue. In the memo line, I put the date, May 16th. Nothing else. It cleared as pending at 9:52. Ruth was standing in the doorway. She had come in partway through and she had not made a sound, and her face had gone the color of unfinished drywall. I put the phone down. "I'll cover the hole," I told her. "I'm just not covering it with this." And then, because it was true and she had earned it, I said, "I should have told you in June. I'm sorry." She nodded once and went to answer the office phone, and that is how the day started. She was there by 2 o'clock with Paige behind her, and she had printed the transaction confirmation, which I did not know you could still do. She came through the kitchen door because that is the door she uses. White tile to shoulder height, the steel table between us, the hood fan running on low the whole time, which is the reason it never turned into theater. She put the printout down and asked me what I thought I was doing. I said the money was back in her account, and the line of credit on Old Post Road was clean, and she owed Callenwood nothing. She said I had returned her like a sweater. She said it twice, louder the second time. She said I had humiliated her in front of the Rookses at that tasting, and now I was humiliating her again by paying her off, and that she had raised me better than to use money on my own mother. Her voice climbed. Mine did not. I have thought about why, and the truth is unimpressive. I had already decided, and decided people don't shout. I let her finish. Then I turned to my sister, who was standing by the mop sink with her keys still in her hand, and I told her that May 16th was open, and that if she wanted it, it was hers. Top tier, the short rib, the terrace lights, the quartet. No charge. The house covers it. One condition, and I said it looking right at her. You have to be the one who says yes. Not her. You. My mother said that was buying her daughter. She said it the way you'd report a crime. And I said the sentence I had been building since about 1 that morning, quiet, with the fan going. I'm not charging you, and I'm not forgiving you. She looked at me for a moment and then she reached for the oldest tool in the box. She said that I had always been staff material and that dressing it up in a deed did not change what I was. I did not get angry. That is the part I am proudest of, and it surprised me too. I know, I said. There's 11 of us here now. I do the hiring. Nobody said anything for a while. The fan ran. Paige stood between us with her thumb working the edge of her key fob, and I watched my sister do the arithmetic she had spent 29 years never having to do. It took about 40 seconds, and it aged her. She said Mom's name first. She said, "Mom, I'm sorry." She said it before she said anything else, which tells you exactly how the house we grew up in was arranged. Then she turned to me and said, "Yes, I want it here." My mother picked the printout back up off the steel table, squared it against her palm, and folded it in half along the crease it already had. She said that in that case she would not be involved in the arrangements, and that we could send her the details when we had them. Then she walked out through the hall and out the front door, which she had never once done in that building in her life. 42 years, and she used the front door on the way out. At the threshold she stopped. Half a second, no more. One hand on the frame, looking at the green wall where the plaster used to be and the raw stairwell standing open behind it. Then she went out to her car. Paige cried in the kitchen for about 10 minutes, standing up, apologizing the entire time. To me, to Mom, to the room. Then she wiped her face with the heel of her hand and asked me a very small question. "Do you hate me?" I said no. I said sit down. And I pulled a stool over and filled her a glass of water from the tap, and she sat, and she drank it. And outside there was still $78,000 and 13 days. On October 9th, I sat in Marlon Pike's office on Court Street and sold 18 points of Ninth Field Partners to Denny Pruitt for $85,000 cash. It took 11 minutes. I went in at 51% and came out at 33%. Ruth Vance became managing member by unanimous written consent, and I became director of operations at $58,000 a year, with a signature limit of $5,000. I read every line before I signed, out of habit, and then I signed, and my hand was steady, and something in my chest let go that I had been holding since the first time I walked into that house with a tray. Denny shook my hand across the table and said, "You're still the one who knows where this house hurts." The bank accepted the equity cure on October 15th, and the loan stayed where it was. Then May came. On the 16th, I was up at 10 of 5, and I tied on an apron. And at 11 o'clock, before the florist, before the first guest, before anybody, I sat all 11 of my people down in the ballroom at a round table with real linen and real plates, and we ate eggs and potatoes, and nobody stood up to eat. Alma said grace in Spanish. At 4:15 I went up the back way, and I opened the door at the top of the service stair. New brass, old jam, 17 treads of quarter-sawn oak sanded and oiled by hand on 9 Sundays, and that handrail with the groove worn into it, which I did not sand out, because it took 80 years of hands to make, and it was not mine to erase. Paige came down it in her dress with one palm sliding along that rail, and the sound of her shoes on the oak went through the whole hall, and 132 people turned around. My mother was in the third row. I watched her watch that staircase. She had come down it 1,000 times with a tray in her hands, and now her daughter was coming down it in white. And I stood in the doorway in an apron and waited to feel something about that. And I didn't. It was just a beautiful house doing what it was built to do. Here is where everybody landed. The bank renewed in October and again the following spring. Callenwood is booked through October of next year, and the Rhodes family came back and rebooked for September, and the thing they mentioned in the email was the staircase. 3 couples have now asked for the staircase by name. Ruth is my boss. She turned out to be very good at it, and I am fine with that, which is the single strangest sentence in this entire story. We talk out loud again. It took until Thanksgiving. My mother came to the wedding and sat in the third row and left before the toasts, which she blamed on her back. In the 6 months after, she told everyone at the club that she was the one who found the venue, and she is not entirely wrong, and I have decided not to spend anything on it. She has never once used the word owner about me, to my face or behind my back. What she does tell people, and this got back to me twice, is that her daughter said she forgives her. That is not what I said. She heard the shape of it and kept the half she could carry, and I think that is probably what most of us do with the sentences that land hardest. She still sends a Christmas card signed Mom. She has never walked up the service stair. Paige and Nathan drive out for dinner about once a month and come in the front door and put their coats on the hall chair like people who live somewhere. Paige and my mother did not speak for most of that first summer, and my sister paid for that in a currency I never had to spend, and I have not forgotten it. Corinne read at the ceremony, by the way. Table 9, seat 4. Nothing else in this county has changed at all. The club still has a kitchen entrance and the staff still use it. The Historical Society still seats the gala by last name. Mr. Rook still has his plate on the wall. That system was here before my mother, and it will outlast me. But it does not run through me anymore, and it does not run through that house. At Callenwood, the service stair is the main stair. The crew eats sitting down, and I pay $4 an hour over what the club pays, which Ruth allows because it turns out I was right about turnover. I own a third of a house I once carried trays in. I answer to somebody else now. And I have never in my life been less interested in the question of what I am worth. Because it turns out you can absolutely set a beautiful table for the people who once told you where to stand, and hand them the best of everything you have, and hold the door while they walk out through it, as long as you finally stop standing there waiting for one of them to notice who built the table. That's my story. $18,000. Page 11. A door that had been plastered shut since 1984. Staff material. I had it printed on my business cards, right under my name, and my crew thinks it's a joke. This week, go find any contract with your name in it and read the page nobody reads. That's where you are. Thank you for being here. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.